The first sound wasn't a voice. It was the sharp, violent snap of a folder slamming shut like a judge striking the gavel before announcing a verdict. Then came the words that sliced through the room with surgical precision. Effective immediately, Lyra Hale, Chief Systems Architect, is terminated. For a heartbeat, TitanCore's boardroom became a vacuum. No one breathed. No one moved. The charts on the projector froze mid-animation, casting ghostly light across a table full of executives suddenly too afraid to blink. At the head of that polished mahogany table stood Rowan Creed, TitanCore's freshly crowned CEO, a man whose confidence was built not on accomplishments, but on buzzwords and boardroom theatrics. He delivered my professional execution with the cold detachment of someone slicing out a defective part from a machine. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a line item, an obstacle, a necessary sacrifice to make himself look decisive in front of the board. He didn't even look in my direction. I felt the heat crawl up the back of my neck. 6 years of building TitanCore's modular platform, line by line, clause by clause, erased with a single breath. The humiliation wasn't quiet or discreet. It was a spectacle. Every director, every VP, every pair of eyes shifted toward me as if watching a body drop. Yet I refused to give Rowan the satisfaction of seeing me break. I gathered my notes, hands steady despite the storm inside me. I rose slowly, feeling the weight of every betrayal in the room pressing against my spine. Then I lifted my chin, and with a voice just loud enough to disturb the silence, I said, "Thank you." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. A few people straightened in their seats. Some mistook it for surrender. Others mistook it for shock. But it wasn't either. It was the first move in a game Rowan didn't even know he had started. Because no one in that room, especially Rowan Creed, knew what I knew. They didn't know the clauses I had written, the protections I had built, the legal blind spots they had never bothered to check. They didn't know that firing me wasn't a victory. It was the trigger to transfer control of the company's most valuable asset back into my hands. As I walked toward the door, my steps echoed louder than they should have. The entire leadership team watched me leave, believing they were witnessing the fall of someone insignificant. But behind the sting of humiliation, beneath the ache in my chest, something sharper pulsed awake. Certainty. Certainty that they had just made the biggest mistake of TitanCore's history. Certainty that the power they believed they had taken was already mine. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I simply walked out of the room, leaving behind the silence, the fear, the arrogance, and carrying with me the truth that would soon tear TitanCore apart. The silence from the boardroom followed me long after I pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the elevator. It clung to me like a second skin, cold, heavy, impossible to shake off. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, then again. Not congratulations, not comfort. Confusion, fear, collapse. The first message was from Theo, my most level-headed engineer. "Are we even allowed to keep working on the code?" Then Hannah. "HR says everything is on pause until new leadership reviews the architecture." And then Cade, who never sugarcoated anything. Guess we're disposable after all. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening involuntarily around the phone. These weren't just coworkers. They were the people I had protected for years. The ones who trusted me to shield them from corporate politics and impossible deadlines. Now they sounded like soldiers abandoned mid-battle, unsure whether their commander had fallen or fled. Guilt hit me with the force of a punch. Had I failed them? Had my silence in that boardroom condemned us all? To them, maybe "thank you" sounded like surrender, like I had accepted Rowan's verdict without a fight. The doubt pressed in fast and brutal. Maybe Rowan was right. Maybe leadership was just a replaceable title. Maybe everything I had built, every late night, every fight to protect my team was already slipping into someone else's hands. Then my phone buzzed again. A single, unexpected message from Milo, the intern barely trusted with QA tickets. They don't know who holds the original patent, do they? And just like that, the world snapped back into focus. My heart kicked. My breath caught. Of all people, it was the intern who saw what the executives had missed. And he was right. Rowan didn't know. The board didn't know. None of them understood that the architecture they believed they owned, the system they had just ripped from my hands, was protected by a clause they had never read. A clause that placed the patent squarely back under my name. The silence that once felt like a tomb suddenly shifted. Not gone, but different. Not a grave, a fuse. Their panic, their confusion, their unraveling was the first sign that TitanCore didn't fire me from the system. They fired themselves out of it. And the fallout was only beginning. That night, my apartment didn't feel like a home. It felt like an archive of every battle I'd ever fought inside TitanCore, papers, prototypes, binders, and coffee-stained notes piling across the table like the debris of a war zone. Outside, rain hammered against the windows with a kind of merciless rhythm, the kind that made the world feel small and unbearably quiet. The lamp above me flickered, throwing long shadows across the stacks of documents, like they were waiting to accuse me of something. I sat there, elbows on the table, head in my hands, letting exhaustion pull at me from every direction. 6 years. 6 years of fighting for this platform. 6 years of holding the company together through budget cuts, restructuring, outages, investor demands, only to be thrown out in front of everyone like a faulty circuit board. The loneliness was sharp enough to taste. Every ping from my phone, another worried message from Theo. Another panicked question from Hannah pressed harder on my chest. I didn't respond. I didn't have reassurance to offer, not yet. The doubt crawled in quietly at first, then faster. What if Rowan was right? What if genius could be replaced by politics? What if everything I'd built was already lost? I pulled another stack of folders toward me, flipping through contracts and old strategy drafts with numb fingers. Page after page blurred together, just ink and bureaucracy, until I opened one thin, yellowed envelope buried under a pile of outdated quarterly reports. My hand stopped. I recognized it instantly the night of the budget massacre 2 years ago. Finance had announced a realignment, which was corporate code for gutting our division. That night, fueled by anger and too much coffee, I had stayed up until dawn drafting alternatives. Most of them had died in committee. One hadn't. I slipped the paper out, heart beating a little harder. Halfway down the page was a clause written so elegantly, so quietly, that even I had forgotten the exact wording. In the event of termination of project funding or leadership oversight, all modular system rights revert to the original architect until full reintegration. My pulse slammed in my ears. Termination of oversight. Rowan firing me wasn't just a humiliation. It triggered the clause. It legally rerouted the patent, the architecture, and all associated frameworks back to me. I set the paper down slowly, hands trembling, breath shaky. The tiny apartment around me hadn't changed. The peeling paint, the flickering light, the cluttered table. But the atmosphere shifted. It no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a command center. The realization hit with the force of a thunderclap. Rowan thought cutting me loose was a victory, but he had unknowingly handed me the very power he wanted to steal. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the rain soften outside. Alone? Yes. Exhausted? Absolutely. But for the first time since that boardroom execution, something fierce steadied inside my chest. Not hope. Not revenge. Leverage. And soon, TitanCore would feel it. 9 days after I was fired, TitanCore Systems stepped onto the biggest stage of the quarter, a high-stakes investor demo that Rowan Creed had promised would redefine the company's future. Investors flew in from New York, Seattle, and London. The auditorium glittered with polished steel, glass, and money. Everyone expected a flawless performance. What they got was the first fracture in Rowan Creed's empire. I wasn't there in person. Didn't need to be. I was in my small apartment, still surrounded by folders and legal documents. The rain had stopped, leaving the world quiet enough that I could hear each Slack notification as it rolled in. Yes, the team still hadn't removed me from the private channels. At 9:02 a.m., Theo messaged, "They're starting the demo!" At 9:05 a.m., Hannah added, "Rowan's bragging again. He keeps saying the system is stronger than ever." Then, at 9:07 a.m., everything changed. The next Slack message from Cade was only 2 words. It froze. I sat up straight. Seconds later, a screenshot appeared in the channel projected across TitanCore's pristine 40-foot screen, glowing like a warning flare. License authorization expired. The phrase pulsed in sterile gray text on a blank white interface. Clean. Cold. Final. A system cannot lie. It cannot bluff. It cannot pretend it belongs to someone who no longer has the right to touch it. For the first 30 seconds, the auditorium mistook it for a glitch. Maybe a connectivity hiccup. Maybe a patch that didn't sync. Rowan forced a laugh. Too loud. Too brittle. "Just a minor hiccup. 2 minutes," he said, waving at the engineers. But 2 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. Every attempt produced the same locked message. License authorization expired. Theo typed, "Ops can't access staging." Hannah added a single emoji. Then came the moment that shattered Rowan's illusion of control. Marissa, the director of operations, a woman known for never raising her voice, stood up in front of the investors, holding a tablet high. "Are we saying," she asked sharply, "that we've lost control of the platform?" The room erupted. Investors turned in their seats. Whispers sharpened into accusations. Screenshots circulated. Phones came out. Facial expressions turned from polite confusion to outright suspicion. And Rowan Creed, the self-appointed savior of TitanCore, began to sweat beneath the stage lights. I leaned back in my chair in my tiny apartment, the faint hum of the heater in the background, my lips curving despite myself. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't sabotage. This was consequence. A system built on contracts cannot be stolen by charisma. A platform architected with precision cannot be resurrected by ego. They thought firing me erased my influence, but all it did was activate the locks I had built long before Rowan strutted into the CEO's chair. For the first time since the boardroom execution, I didn't feel erased. I felt inevitable. TitanCore had just learned the truth. You can fire the architect, but you cannot fire the architecture. The morning after TitanCore's humiliating demo collapse, my phone lit up with a number I recognized immediately. Human Resources. For a few seconds, I let it ring, half tempted to ignore it completely and let them stew in their own panic. But Curiosity won. I wanted to hear the script they had rehearsed.
Lyra!
The voice bubbled through the speaker, overly bright and artificially warm. How are you holding up? We've been so concerned. Concerned. The word might have made me laugh if I hadn't been so tired. Where was this concern when Rowan stripped me of my title in front of the entire board? Where was it when my team unraveled in confusion after being abandoned by leadership? Where was it when TitanCore pretended they owned the system I built with my blood and bones? I leaned back in my chair, letting silence stretch. I'm fine, I said flatly. Good, good, she rushed on, as if afraid I might hang up. Listen, these past few days have been challenging for everyone. Leadership has been talking, and we feel it would be mutually beneficial if you came back. We'd love to restore continuity. Continuity. A polished corporate synonym for desperation. I could almost picture Rowan pacing in his corner office, snapping at HR to fix this mess before investors started pulling out completely. The HR rep continued, her tone rising with forced optimism. Of course, we'd be happy to discuss an adjustment to your compensation package. There it was. The bait. The assumption that everything my loyalty, my silence, my architecture could be bought if they found the right number of zeros. I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I let the quiet settle like dust before I answered. Each word slow, precise, sharpened to a blade. You don't have enough money. The line went dead silent. I'm sorry, she stammered. You don't have enough money, I repeated, to buy back the truth. Not the sleepless nights, not the years I spent protecting a system your executives never understood, not the patent you tried to bury, and certainly not my silence. Her breathing grew quick and uneven, searching for a page in a script that didn't exist. For the first time since Rowan's ambush, I felt nothing but clarity. TitanCore wasn't calling because they valued me. They were calling because they were drowning, and I had no intention of being their life raft. I ended the call calmly, deliberately, not with anger, but with finality. That was the moment the power shifted entirely from TitanCore to me. 2 days after I hung up on HR, an email slid into my inbox with a subject line that made me freeze mid-breath. Invitation to discuss strategic alignment. Not from TitanCore, not from any recruiter. From Stratus Vector, TitanCore's fiercest rival. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. It was too perfectly timed. TitanCore had barely survived its first public meltdown. Rumors were already spreading. Investors were whispering. And suddenly a competitor wanted to align? Red flags everywhere. Still, curiosity has claws. So I opened the message. It was short, razor sharp, almost cryptic. We understand the current turbulence. If you're open to dialogue, we'd like to meet. A. Cross. Adrian Cross. A name with history. Years ago, he was one of TitanCore's top senior engineers. Brilliant, stubborn, allergic to corporate nonsense. Rowan had fired him during a restructuring, claiming he was unmanageable. Adrian had laughed on the way out. Rowan couldn't recognize innovation if it bit him, he'd said before walking out the door. Now he worked for Stratus Vector, and he wanted to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him in a quiet cafe tucked between two high-rises, one of those places where the lighting is low, the music soft, and the staff doesn't eavesdrop. Adrian arrived with the same half-amused grin I remembered. Time had carved lines around his eyes, but the sharpness in his gaze hadn't dulled. "Lyra Hale," he said, sliding into the booth. Didn't think I'd see the day you'd be on the outside looking in. Life surprises, I replied. He chuckled. Rowan always had a talent for pushing out people who actually mattered. First me, now you. Except... He leaned forward, voice dropping. You left with something he desperately needs. I didn't blink. And what makes you so sure? Adrian reached into his bag and pulled out a tablet. He turned it around and slid it toward me. My stomach tightened. On the screen was a highlighted copy of the licensing contract I had drafted 2 years ago. The same one Rowan never understood. He tapped a yellow clause with the back of his pen. Clause 7.2.1. The Oversight Clause. My clause. You're the only one who can activate the modular system, Adrian said softly. Without you, TitanCore is just a shell pretending to be a company. For a moment, the world around us blurred into silence. There it was, spoken aloud for the first time by someone who understood. Adrian leaned back. So the question isn't whether the system works, it's whether you want it to work. For them, or for someone else. Milo had been right. TitanCore had no idea what they'd lost. But Stratus Vector did. The next morning, headlines flashed across every tech outlet like confetti after a parade. TitanCore restores platform stability. CEO Rowan Creed resolves crisis. The articles were clearly orchestrated, the phrasing too polished, the timing too convenient. Rowan had fed the press a carefully crafted illusion, a lie, wrapped in corporate confidence and buzzword bravado. For a moment, the world believed him. Investors relaxed. Analysts softened. Even Theo messaged me. Did he fix it? Hannah sent nothing but a question mark hope mixed with confusion. I knew better. A system this complex doesn't get magically restored by a man who couldn't interpret a licensing clause if it were printed in neon. Rowan's victory was a stage prop, a hollow replica built to fool anyone who didn't understand how deeply the architecture ran. And then, 24 hours later, at exactly 9:17 a.m., the facade shattered. Screens across TitanCore conference rooms, engineering hubs, investor test beds went black before lighting up with the same phrase that had humiliated them days earlier. License authorization expired. This time there was no auditorium to absorb the shock, no investors to whisper politely, no safety net. TitanCore's entire infrastructure collapsed. Client sandboxes, demo environments, internal dev pipelines, all of it dark. Cade messaged me first. He's losing it. Nothing works, not even staging. Minutes later, the news leaked. Tech journalists swarmed like sharks scenting blood. Inside the TitanCore boardroom, chaos detonated. Rowan insisted it was sabotage. His voice rose, frantic, cracking under pressure. But the director's men and women who had smirked as he fired me weren't buying it anymore. "Show us the recovery logs," one demanded. "Where's the authorization trail?" another snapped. And then the truth slipped out like a knife between ribs. Rowan hadn't restored the platform. He'd rebooted a shallow demo environment, a cosmetic replica with no licensing, no back-end activation, no legal authorization. A puppet made of HTML and hope. One senior director finally said it out loud. "You misled us. This wasn't a recovery. This was theater." The room erupted. Investors pulled calls mid-meeting. Partners froze negotiations. Every ounce of confidence evaporated. Rowan Creed, the man who strutted into the CEO chair like a king, now stood pale and trembling, sweat beading along his collar, eyes darting like a trapped animal. And me? I sat miles away in my little apartment, watching the updates roll in, feeling a strange, quiet calm settle over me. This wasn't vengeance. It was simple, inevitable truth. TitanCore hadn't just lost the system. It had lost the illusion of control. When the call finally came from TitanCore's board, I wasn't surprised. The second collapse had left them with no excuses, no scapegoats, and no illusions. What did surprise me was the tone, cold, stripped of arrogance, and trembling with desperation. They wanted me in the executive chamber by morning. I arrived early, walking past employees who suddenly pretended not to stare. The energy in the building felt different, thin, brittle, electrified with fear. TitanCore had always been loud, self-assured, a machine humming with confidence. Today, it felt like a hospital waiting room. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Half the directors were red with anger, the other half were pale with dread. Documents were scattered across the table logs, error reports, leaked screenshots, and near the doorway, like a guard dog too anxious to sit, stood Rowan Creed. He looked nothing like the man who'd fired me in front of this same room. His tie was crooked, his eyes were hollow, his confidence gone. "Lyra, there's no need for this," he started, voice cracking. "The situation is under control." Before he could finish, a senior director barked, "Sit down, Rowan!" He flinched, but didn't move. He just hovered there, breathing hard, like a man bracing for impact. I didn't even look at him. My focus was on the long table, the same table where I had been executed, erased, dismissed. Now they were the ones holding their breath. The chairman cleared his throat. "Lyra, thank you for coming. We'd like to discuss a path forward." I placed my folder on the table. Calm, deliberate. The kind of calm that unnerves powerful people. "I'm not here," I said evenly, "to ask for my job back. Let's make that clear." A murmur rippled through the room. They expected bargaining, anger, negotiation. They expected me to crawl back. They'd misunderstood me before. They still did. I held their gaze, every word sharp as glass. "I will not return to TitanCore. I will not restore access. What I will do is sell the patent." The silence was immediate and violent. A director dropped his pen. Another inhaled too sharply. Rowan's face crumpled into something between panic and disbelief. "You can't," he choked. "You don't have the authority." I slid the signed documents across the table. Every signature, every lapse, every clause they had ignored. The truth stared back at them in black and white. The system belonged to me. Not TitanCore, not Rowan. Me. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the power shift settle like a crown on my shoulders. "This isn't a negotiation," I said softly. "It's an outcome." And for the first time, every person in that room understood. They hadn't fired me. They'd freed me. 2 days after the boardroom confrontation, I stepped into the marble lobby of Stratus Vector. The air smelled of polished ambition, fresh paint, new carpets, quiet confidence. It was the opposite of TitanCore's frantic, collapsing chaos. For the first time since Rowan fired me, I wasn't walking into a room as a casualty. I was walking in as the person holding the keys. Adrian Cross was waiting near the elevator, hands in his pockets, that familiar half-amused grin tugging at his face. "They know you won," he said without greeting. "The only question now is whether you'll let TitanCore live with the ruins or help us build something better." He led me into a glass-walled conference room on the top floor. On the table sat a single folder, sleek, heavy, unmistakably expensive. Inside it, a contract. My name at the top, and a number so large it didn't feel real at first, $1,100,000,000. $1.1 billion. Not for a company, not for a merger, not for a team. For the patent. My architecture. My creation. I let the weight of the moment settle. All the nights spent coding through blackouts. All the budget wars I fought. All the humiliation in that boardroom when Rowan tried to erase me. This was the price of underestimating me. Adrian watched me carefully. No tricks, he said quietly. No corporate games. This is clean. You walk out owning your future. I believed him. But money wasn't the thing holding me back. It was purpose. I hadn't spent 6 years shaping a system only to watch it be twisted by another greedy executive. TitanCore didn't deserve it. But did Stratus Vector? I slid a second sheet across the table, my own edition, drafted the night before. Adrian scanned it, eyebrows lifting. You want to serve as Chief Advisory Architect, he read aloud, with full oversight authority and ethical veto power. That's right, I said. I'm not selling my work to be misused by the next Rowan Creed. If it's going to reshape the industry, I'm going to guard it. Adrian leaned back, a slow smile spreading. Protecting your creation even after you walk away. I should have expected nothing less. When the pen finally touched paper, something inside me loosened. Not greed, not vengeance, freedom. I wasn't just selling a patent. I was reclaiming the destiny TitanCore tried to steal. As I signed the last page, I felt it fully. They didn't ruin me. They revealed me. It took TitanCore 14 days to unravel. 14 days from the moment Rowan Creed slammed that folder shut to the moment his empire collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance. The headlines hit first, sweeping through the tech world like a storm surge. TitanCore loses patent rights. Platform ownership disputed. CEO under fire. Shares plummet amid licensing catastrophe. Each headline landed like a hammer blow. Partners froze contracts, venture funds withdrew, analysts predicted bankruptcy, and for the first time, TitanCore, once hailed as the next billion-dollar titan, looked breakable. Inside the company, panic mutated into silence. People who once applauded Rowan's decisiveness now avoided eye contact with him in the hallway. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Directors whispered behind closed doors. Somebody had to take the fall. And there he was, Rowan Creed. The man who strutted into the CEO role believing he was untouchable. He now looked like a ghost in his own building, trembling hands, crooked tie, a smear of panic across his face. The confidence he used as armor had shattered, leaving only fear behind. It didn't take long. The board convened one final, brutal session. Voices rose, papers slammed, accusations flew like shrapnel. And in the end, the verdict was simple. Rowan Creed was fired. Effective immediately. The same words he once used on me. Only this time, no one gasped. No one stared. No one pretended to be shocked. They let him walk out alone. Power is cyclical, my mentor once told me. It always returns to the person who earned it. I didn't fully understand that until now. The press conference. 2 days later, I found myself stepping into a crowded press room, cameras popping, reporters shouting my name, the air sharp with anticipation. A long table waited at the front. Behind it, a stack of documents. The contract, the proof, the future. Rowan sat off to the side, hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped, tie loosened, nothing like the man who had tried to erase me. He didn't speak. He didn't look up. He was already a footnote. I stood at the podium, lights blazing like 1,000 small suns on my skin. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready. I picked up the pen that would finalize my billion-dollar deal with Stratus Vector. A lifetime of late nights. Years of being underestimated. 6 years of holding TitanCore together while others claim the credit. All of it flowed into that moment. Flashbulbs exploded as the pen touched paper. The room vibrated with energy, with disbelief, with something close to awe. When I finished signing, I looked up, steady, unbroken. I turned to the cameras, and with the same calm that silenced the boardroom weeks earlier, I said, "Thank you." This time, there was no confusion, no misinterpretation, no mistaking the meaning. It wasn't gratitude. It was triumph. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant to your story. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not because I escaped TitanCore, but because I outgrew it. My story didn't end in their boardroom. It began in my own hand.